Hello, I'm Amy the Amazonian, and this is a video about the best format you're not playing, Historic Brawl. Historic Brawl is a 100-card singleton format, meaning that every card in your deck has to be unique except for basic lands, that uses a commander. Your commander can be any legendary creature or planeswalker that's available in all of Arena, which means that you have choices. In fact, you have so many choices that you can pretty much define your deck based on your commander. If you're looking for something based around spells, based around card draw, based around enchantments, based around artifacts, there's almost definitely something that will fit that archetype. And kind of like other commander formats, your commander also decides some things about your deck. It decides the color identity of your deck. So let's say you chose Florian to be your commander. Florian has a black and red casting cost and a color identity of black and red, which means that your deck can include and can only include black, red, or colorless cards. There's also some cards, though, that have color identities that don't just match their casting costs. I'm going to bring up one here. How about Golos? Golos is a very popular commander, and you might notice is a colorless card, but has a color identity of all 5 colors because of that activated ability, meaning that Golos is a deck that allows you to play all 5 colors and colorless cards. If you play Commander, you might be familiar with partners or backgrounds. Neither of these currently exist in Arena, but we do have something called Specialize. Specialize is an ability on creatures that allows you to transform perpetually, which means permanently, the creatures in your deck. And if you choose a specialized creature as your commander, you get to include their base color as the first part of their color identity, and then a second color which you choose. So for example, Lazelle, you could choose green, red, black, or blue as her second color. And then you would be able to play either of those colors in your deck. Because Historic Brawl is a live format, it does also include the rebalanced cards that have been released into Arena. Here's a couple examples of commanders which have been rebalanced. Usually the changes to these are pretty small relative to their paper-printed counterparts, but it's always good to double-check what the text is of the card when you're playing. Another part of being a live format is the inclusion of some digital-only mechanics. I briefly mentioned Specialize and Perpetual before, but you're likely to run into things like Double Team, Seek, Conjure, and Boons while you're playing this format. There's a lot of very interesting and unique digital-only cards. There are a few cards that are banned in Historic Brawl. I don't know if I included all of them at the time of this recording, but here are the ones that I could think of. Some of them are just generically very, very good cards like Ugin or Oko Thief of Crowns. But most of these cards are actually cards that specifically are able to target your opponent's commander and disable either their casting or their abilities. So if you're wondering why there are so many of these cards, it's because they want you to be able to play your commander and use your commander in this format. Even though there isn't a sideboard in this format, you can still have a companion. As a quick example, I have a Nethroi deck with an Amori companion, where all of the non-land permanents in my deck are creatures. Companions can be a fun way to add a new deck building requirement and spice up your deck a little bit. This being one of my favorite formats means that I have a lot of different decks with a lot of different commanders. Some of my personal favorites include Dat Boy, which is a Gitrog monster deck. It's about putting lands in the graveyard. I also have Claws for Alarm, which is mono green stompy helmed by Goreclaw. She's very strong. I have Petty Theft, which is about stealing and playing your opponent's cards, which is really aided by a lot of the arena-only cards. There's a lot of ones that make copies of cards in your opponent's decks. And I also have pretty much a dozen different decks for any color you can think of. And it means that I always get to have fun when I'm playing this format. I'm going to actually showcase a few of these decks in this video, but I want to point out first that this is an unranked format, which means that you can play it to have fun. There's also a deck matching algorithm which helps figure out what you and your commander should be playing up against. So if you have a deck that seems to win a lot, you'll start matching up against more and more powerful commanders as you play. The stakes are low, the fun is high, so let's take a deck and play a game or two. The first deck I'll be playing for this video is the Gitrog monster. The Gitrog monster is a black and green commander who rewards me for putting lands into my graveyard by drawing me cards. So there's a lot of things in this deck which put lands into graveyards, and then let me play those lands again or otherwise get them back onto the battlefield or in my deck. I also happen to be in colors with really good removal and ramp, so I have a lot of big scary threats like Massacre Worm and Liliana, as well as fantastic removal like Casualties of War. So let's take this deck into the Historic Brawl queue for our first game. In this format, both players start with 25 life, and you can take a free mulligan at the start of the game, which means that if you don't like the opening 7 cards you've drawn, you can actually put them back into the deck and draw a new 7 without taking a penalty. Which I don't think I'll be doing here because I really like this opening hand. It's got a bunch of cards I like, including an arena-only card called Pool of Vigorous Growth. Now, the name's a bit of a hint, but it might remind you a little bit of a play mode when I describe it. This is an artifact that sits on the battlefield, and you can pay X and discard a card at sorcery speed to create a token that's a random creature of that cost onto the battlefield. Does that sound like maybe Momir Vig? Because it is Momir Vig, and I'm going to play this onto the battlefield. This is a card which was part of Historic Horizons, which was a jumpstart set in Arena last year. 2 years ago? Oh gosh, I've really lost the path of time. So I've got this on the battlefield. I'm not going to be using it right away. I just wanted to make sure I got it out there. And also, we should take a look at what our opponent is playing. Brawl, Storm Conduit. This is oftentimes a Storm commander, which means that they're looking to deal a lot of damage by casting a lot of spells and copying a lot of spells. I'm going to play my Overgrown Tomb here. And I am going to pay 2 life and get the Augur of Autumn into play. I've already played a land for turn, so I can't use this forest. But getting extra lands in hand is great for me because I can discard them to the Pool of Vigorous Growth, and then cast my commander, the Gitrog monster, to get additional value out of a land going to the graveyard. Let's go ahead and play Beside You Who Endures, and then Binding the Old Gods. We're going to destroy the Celestis, which is this mana rock they've played. And next turn, I'll be getting a forest off of Binding the Old Gods. May as well swing in and deal first blood here. Well, sort of first blood. I dealt 2 damage to myself with the Overgrown Tomb earlier. Primal Amulet. That's going to discount their spells and eventually copy them if they transform it into a land. Speaking of lands, let's get our Woodland Chasm. It's a forest. It's also a swamp. Comes in tapped either way. I'm going to start by playing, actually, this forest from my hand, and then the Gitrog monster, who will allow me to play a second land for turn. Unless they counter it with Ionize! Oh no, I was hoping to play this Tranquil Thicket off the top of my library. So the Gitrog monster is now in the graveyard. So I'm going to bring it back. The way that commanders work, by the way, if you've never played a commander format, is that when they die or otherwise move between zones, for example, if it gets bounced into your hand, you can choose to put it into the command zone. And then each time you cast it from the command zone, it costs 2 more colorless mana. So it costs 5 the first time, 7 the next time, and this applies to both players' commanders. Now they've used up their treasures, so right now they don't have an awful lot on the battlefield. I think that now is a good time, though, for me to start building up my board even more. We know what's on top of our library. It's Timeless Witness. But first things first, let's attack Brawl. Keep his loyalty low. This Brawl is able to duplicate spells, which can get very scary very fast. I'm going to play Hive of the Eye Tyrant, and then Ren and 7. I'm going to use Ren and 7's -3 ability to make a Tree Folk. Nice big scary Tree Folk, and then I'll pass the turn. I do have the ability to cycle this if I want to draw that Timeless Witness, but I don't think that that's a priority right now. We're plussing to Scry. I don't have to worry about them copying yet. But I do like that they have a Reliquary Tower on the battlefield, meaning they can have all the cards they want in their hand. They've played Electrostatic Field, who's going to deal damage to me when they cast instants or sorceries, just like Brawl. Okay. I'm going to start by plussing here, revealing the top cards and putting the lands into my hand, putting the rest into the graveyard. Ooh! More lands. Let's go ahead and play some lands. Sliverbore Pathway. This got a little bit bigger. How about a Death Sprout? Get rid of the electrostatic field. They might counter this if they're able to. Ah, expansion! No, they're gonna turn it right around and actually destroy one of my creatures. Ooh, that's spicy. So they've cast and copied a spell, so Rawl's able to deal damage directly to Ren and 7. They're getting rid of my Tree Folk here. I love this. This is a very fun play from them. They'll get a basic land out of their deck, and then I'll get a basic land out of my deck, which means that we're going to shuffle up a little bit. And, hey, there's the land right there. We've already played a land for turn, though. You know what could be fun? Using the Pool of Vigorous Growth. So we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4. I've had this sitting on the board. We're going to discard a land to the Tranquil Thicket, in this case. Ah, what did we get? The Sizzling Soloist. Ooh, able to make creatures unable to block. Or force our opponents to attack with creatures? Interesting. Probably not going to be super relevant against a Brawl deck, but still nice to see. I love just generating random creatures, and probably the best mana cost to activate this for is 8, 7, 6, where you get these big, scary creatures, oftentimes with things like Trample, Flying, or Haste. Oh, and I mentioned before this is a Storm deck. There's the 1,000-Year Storm. I would say that this is one of Rawl's signature cards. It's going to duplicate their spells for every other spell they cast during a turn, which is kind of like everything has Storm. Really cool. I played a land off the top of my deck. I'm going to activate Ren and 7's ability. And I'm also going to activate the Hive of the Eye Tyrant here. And I'm going to attack with 2 creatures at Rawl and 1 at the opponent directly. And I guess I'm going to get rid of Expansion Explosion from their graveyard as we attack in. This is enough to take Rawl off the battlefield, but they still have this 1,000-Year Storm. I did have ways to bring that back during the turn, but I felt it would be a lot more fun if we just kind of played the game out with a little bit more chaos. So I'm going to use Pool of Vigorous Growth for all my remaining mana, X equals 5. And I made the Scion of the Swarm. Whenever I gain life, it gets a +1/+1 counter. Neat. They have 3 cards in hand. Brawl, that's going to further discount their spells. Stormkiln Artist, who's going to make treasures when they cast spells. They could pretty much go infinite if they manage to get ways to draw cards here. That's very exciting. For them, not so much for me. We're going to activate Ren and 7 again. Found 1 land in those top cards. A whole bunch more went to the graveyard, though. And I'm going to play the Timeless Witness. Timeless Witness is going to let me bring back a card from my graveyard, and I want to get Binding the Old Gods. And we're able to make it so one of these creatures can't block. I'm going to say the Stormkiln Artist can't block. And our opponent sees where this is going. We're going to force them to attack with creatures by playing more of them. They're not going to have anything on the board, and we're going to win that game. GG, Rawl. Bear with me for this next deck. It's Goreclaw, Terror of Kalsizma. She's a bear who costs 4 mana and discounts your creatures that have power 4 or greater, also making them stronger during combat. So we have a lot of creatures with power 4 or greater. That shouldn't be surprising. We also have a lot of ways to draw cards in green, as many as I could fit feasibly into the deck, and ramp on turn 1 and 2, so we can get Goreclaw down early and hopefully cast as many creatures as we can to overwhelm our opponent. I think that this deck is pretty easy to explain while I'm playing it, so let's just hop into the queue. It's going to be a mono-green deck versus a mono-red deck. Our opponent's playing Chandra, Awakened Inferno. This is a Planeswalker which can deal damage and exile creatures, can wipe the board, and can deal incremental damage through emblems. Unfortunately, that -3 ability does take out my commander, but it doesn't kill everything in my deck, so I think this is going to be a good game. I didn't take the free mulligan, but our opponent did. I feel like 3 mana, ranger class, and a bunch of other cool creatures is going to be enough for me to start. So let's get a forest onto the battlefield. And then another forest and ranger class, which comes with a 2/2 wolf. Very cool. This allows me to play creatures off the top of my deck if I level it up to level 3. And because I don't really feel like I should mutate with Gemrazor here, I'm going to just level it up to level 2. And attack with this wolf token. It's going to get a +1/+1 counter. And our opponent is going to just kill it before that even happens. We deal no damage, we have no wolf, but we do have a level 2 ranger class still in the battlefield. That's nice. With the knowledge that our opponent is very easily able to destroy Goreclaw, 3 damage means it dies to a lightning bolt. I'm actually just going to cast Gemrazor here. Gemrazor has 4 toughness, which to mono red is a world of difference. 3? That's easy. 4? No way. Now look at that. The card that they just cycled, Sweltering Suns, 3 damage to each creature. This survives. And it's going to discount my Great Henge, which I want to get onto the battlefield. Ooh, just kidding. 4 damage? No problem. Chandra, Torch of Defiance has a -3 ability that's just going to kick this off the battlefield, and next turn generate mana, which they can use to play their commander. Kinda scary if you ask me, but I can take her out really fast by playing the Besiju, who endures, shifting Ceratops, giving it haste, that's one of its abilities, and attacking Chandra. It also gets a +1/+1 counter. Lucky me!
We're done here.
I'm sorry, Goreclaw. I promise I'll cast you soon. Maybe once I already have the Great Henge down so I can use you to draw a card. I think that would be really good. The Great Henge is such a good card if you have a creature-based green deck. It's very easy for me to put this into my decks. So they have 4 mana. If they have a land, then they'll be pretty close to casting Chandra, but not quite there. Well, they've got to mull over their choices here. Because as our creatures get bigger, it's going to get harder and harder for them to remove them. This is kind of a thing that happens when you're playing red versus green, is you eventually get to the point where Chaos Warp is the only thing that can take out your opponent's creatures. That or Star of Extinction, because it deals 20 damage to every creature on the battlefield. Ooh, it's a land. They're up to 5 mana now. Is the Shifting Ceratops going to survive? They're using up their timeout. We have a little time to wait here, so we may as well chat about Brawl as a format. Hey, did you guys know that Brawl's really fun? Oh! They just played Ironcrag Feat, which they're using to cast their commander, Chandra, Awakened Inferno, because it gave them loads of mana. And they're just gonna -5 and exile the Shifting Ceratops. It's gone! Okay, that was really rude. I'm gonna play Elder Gargaroth. If I was able to combo together a couple spells here, I would have played Goreclaw first. But Elder Gargaroth is a really big, scary creature who's going to be hard for them to get rid of. Vigilance. Gives me card draw when it attacks, or beasts. It's so strong. It's great. They've got the Defiler Instinct out, though, which does have First Strike. They could combine that with removal. Ooh, looks like they're not going to. It's Defiler Instinct, giving them a discount. They pay 2 life for Chandra's Ember Cat. I'm going to play the Great Henge. This is what I wanted to do a few turns ago. And then Goreclaw, which will let me draw a card. Okay, Castle Garenbrig. I'm going to attack Chandra, because this got a +1/+1 counter on it. I'm very happy about that. It doesn't die for the -3 ability here. Elder Gargaroth gets a counter from the Ranger class. We drew a land, and I'm going to ramp a little more with Into the North. I'm going to get, I don't know, basic snow-covered forest. It's the only snowlands we have in this deck. Nice, they've got Mobilized District over here. When you're playing a monocolored deck, you can get kind of fancy with the lands that you're playing. There's a lot of very interesting colorless lands that have activated abilities. Opportunistic Dragon is going to let them actually take an artifact from me. So the Great Henge has lost all of its abilities, but it's now living on our opponent's side of the battlefield, which means I don't get the rewards from it. And Townraiser Tyrant is going to get rid of any non-mana abilities from one of my lands, and they're going to be dealing damage to me. Thankfully, this is, you know, just got mana abilities, but I don't like that it's dealing damage to me. Let's go ahead and play Snow-Covered Forest. Heraldic Banner. This is going to give me mana and also buff my green creatures. Now I'm going to play Kogla the Titan Ape. It's going to fight a creature on enter the battlefield. Eeny, meeny, miny. Get out of here, I want my Great Henge back. And I'm going to go to combat. I'm going to draw a card off the Elder Gargaroth. And put a +1/+1 counter on Goreclaw so it doesn't just die to Defiler of Instinct's first strike. Though it wouldn't anyway, it gets +1/+1 from its own ability. So we're swinging in with a 9/8 and an 8/6. They both have trample, which is really nice. And looks like they're going to take out my commander. That's a smart thing to do. Goodbye, Goreclaw. We did draw a creature, though. I'm going to move Goreclaw back to the command zone. She does cost 2 more mana if I want to cast her again. We're going to play Ascendant Pack Leader, who comes with a counter because we have nice strong things, and draws a card. Do I want to sacrifice Castle Garenbrig? I do. Their deck's going to be able to deal direct damage to my face, though probably not enough to kill me on this next turn. So I just want to keep my life total high and gain life off the Great Henge. Right now, I actually think we've practically won this game. There's a couple things that could stop us, but we have big creatures. We have trample. We have destructive abilities, card draw, and that's going to be a victory. The third and final deck I want to play for this video is Lazelle, Githyanki Warrior. This is a creature with Specialize, who I briefly mentioned earlier. Specialize means that I can discard a card of a color or a land of a basic type in order to transform her permanently or perpetually into a different creature. I can even return this to my command zone while maintaining these changes. So in this case, I have chosen Lazelle to be a white-blue deck because you do get to choose a second color when you have a specialized commander. This is supposed to be analogous to a background if you're playing in Commander. So Lazelle, Githyanki Warrior, is really good for Blink because she has strong enter the battlefield abilities, and she actually has a built-in way to remove herself from the battlefield and bring herself back to re-trigger her abilities. So this is a deck with lots of ways to blink your creatures, which is to temporarily exile them and bring them back, and get strong enter the battlefield abilities. We also have some really sweet cards that are just in blue or white, like Elesh Norn, Grand Cenobite, Sublime Epiphany, and River's Rebuke. This is also a really good excuse for somebody like me to play Teferi Time Raveler. You might notice that this is the alchemy version of this card, which is not quite as scary as the paper version of Teferi. So we're going to take this deck into the queue and get in the game. This is a pretty nice opening hand for this deck. We've got 3 mana, one of them is on a modal double-faced card, and we're up against a mono-black deck helmed by Ayara, First of Locthwain. I don't think I need to take my free mulligan here, so I won't. Looks like they're going to take it, though. And it's time to start. I'm going to use Seagate Reborn, and I'm not going to pay 3 life, because I can't use that mana anyway. And then, Hallowed Fountain, and I'm not going to pay the 2 life. We're just going to have 1 blue mana sitting here, doing nothing with it. I don't run that many counter spells in most of my decks because I don't find them that fun to play against, but a lot of other people will, and it will intimidate opponents. So let's go ahead and play our first creature for the game, Nadar, Selfless Paladin. He enters the battlefield and ventures into the dungeon. I'm going to choose the middle dungeon, even if they kill Nadar right here. So I get 1 Scry. Charming Prince. That's pretty nice, but I would really like a land. So I'm actually going to throw that to the bottom of my deck. I do have the ability to, if this is able to attack, create a treasure token, so I can play Solemn Simulacrum, and ideally use that to get more mana. That's my plan here, because I didn't draw a land. So let's make a treasure token. deal 3 damage, and then cast Solemn Simulacrum, who's going to get a basic land from my deck to the battlefield. Let's go for white. Go 8 planes. I should probably mention what Lazelle does, because I did choose for her to specialize into white or blue for this deck. With white, we seek, which is to grab a random copy of and put into your hand, a non-land permanent with mana value 3 or less. That's going to get us a lot of really good cards. What else can we do? We can also make a copy by conjuring of a creature that's in our opponent's library. We also can cast that creature as if it were generic mana, which is a really cool way to use your opponent's cards. If my opponent likes their cards so much, then hey, I'll probably like them too. Unfortunately, they played a Phyrexian Obliterator, which is really, really scary. So I'm not going to attack here. I'm just going to sit here. Their black market connections is going to give them a choice between card advantage, creatures, and treasures. Nice, Dread Presence. They played a Swamp, which is going to let them deal 2 damage to any target. Solemn Simulacrum. You know what? I don't think so. I'm going to use Cloud Shift here. Oh, something's happening. Are you thinking about my choice of removal? I want to ramp. That's why I'm doing this. I need to get rid of that Phyrexian Obliterator because I can't sacrifice permanents right now. I don't have enough to sacrifice. Also, getting mana is good because it gets me to River's Rebuke, and they're paying a lot of life for their black market connections. They're ramping with Cold Steel Heart. You know, I have a temptation here, and I'm going to indulge in it. I'm going to use Ephemerate. That's right, we're going Blink crazy in this house. And we're going to Blink Solemn Simulacrum to get another land. This time, blue. And during my upkeep, this has Rebound, so I'm going to Blink the Solemn Simulacrum again. You know it. Solemn Simulacrum coming back, getting me another basic. Let's go for a Plains. And we have 6 untapped mana. Sorry. Make it 7. And we're going to cast River's Rebuke to put all their permanents back into their hand except for lands. This is going to bring them back to 5 mana, and it's just going to let me swing in freely with Nadar. They had paid so much life for black market connections, getting card draw, getting treasures, and getting that changeling on the battlefield. Now, the Dread Presence is going to gain them a little bit of life back and kill my Solemn Simulacrum, which will actually give me a card, which is great. Oh. And they're following up with a Fatal Push, but they didn't have a permanent leave the battlefield under their control, so that was just a itty-bitty misplay on their part. We've got some good follow-up, though. I'm going to use Obscura Polymorphous. This is an arena-only card to exile Dread Presence, and it's going to put a random creature from their deck into their hand. We're going to attack in with Nadar. I'm going to draw a card. Because we've completed a dungeon, all my other creatures will get +1/+1. I'm going to play this land that we just drew. Hello, land. And I'm going to get Lazelle onto the battlefield. And I still stand by the philosophy of my opponent probably has cooler cards than I do. I don't have any blue cards in hand, so I can't specialize into blue. Still can go into white, though, and I don't really feel like I need Spirited Companion. So, Lazelle is going to seek for me Elite Spellbinder. They have 8 life left. We have way more than 8 damage on the battlefield because Lazelle does have double strike. And she also gets +1/+1, which she specializes, which is neat. Our opponent's using the Cabal Stronghold, though, to generate a lot of mana. They have 8 mana here, which would be enough to kill everything with, say, Meathook Massacre. Oh no, it's Sheoldred! Sheoldred is going to make me sacrifice a creature. Okay, whatever. Bye, Polymorphist. What they don't know is that I can get rid of this. I have actually choices on how I want to get rid of it, and I'm going to use Elspeth Conquers Death, exiling Sheoldred forever, and then attacking in for tons of damage. And you know what? Let's each lose 1 life. We started with 25, and we'll end at 25. Good game, Ayara. Hopefully this video helped explain Historic Brawl to you and got you interested in the format with the decks that I was playing. If you ever want to know more about Historic Brawl, feel free to stop by my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Amazonian, where I play a lot of the different decks that you see behind me. Brawl is a really fun format, and I think you all enjoy it as much as I do.